Have you ever thought that your body might actually send out warning signs before a stroke happens, sometimes even a whole month ahead? The truth is it really does. Our bodies are incredible systems always trying to speak to us. The problem is most of us simply don't listen. And that silence, that moment of ignoring the signs, has cost so many people their chance to save themselves or someone they love. Stroke doesn't spare anyone. I've seen it again and again in more than 30 years of working with patients over the age of 50. Here in the United States alone, nearly 800,000 people suffer a stroke every single year. And that number isn't just a statistic, it represents lives, families, futures turned upside down in an instant. What troubles me most is knowing that so many of these strokes could have been prevented if only the early signs had been recognized. What I want you to understand is this: the first symptoms of a stroke don't come with alarms or bright flashing lights. They're subtle, they pass quickly, and they're easy to dismiss. But hidden inside those small signals can be a life-saving warning. And if you know how to spot them, you can literally save your own life. In today's video, I'll walk you through the 9 most important warning signs, signals your body often gives before a stroke strikes. But before we dive into the details, let's pause for a moment and ask what actually causes a stroke in the first place. So if you truly care about your health, stay with me all the way to the end. I promise what you're about to hear might just change the way you look at your body. And if you find this content helpful, leave me a comment below. If not, just type the number 0, that way I'll know how to serve you better. Causes and risk factors. When people think about stroke, they often imagine it striking out of nowhere like a storm with no warning. But the truth is that storm has usually been building for years inside the body. Stroke doesn't just happen, it's the result of silent changes taking place in our blood vessels, in the heart, and in the daily choices we make. There are 2 main types of stroke. The most common, about 85% of cases, is called an ischemic stroke. Picture the blood vessels in your brain as highways carrying oxygen and nutrients to every single cell. Now imagine a truck breaking down in the middle of that highway, blocking all traffic. That's what happens when a blood clot or a piece of plaque clogs an artery. The flow stops, and within minutes, brain cells begin to die. The second type, less common but just as dangerous, is hemorrhagic stroke, about 15% of cases. This happens when a blood vessel in the brain bursts. Often it's due to high blood pressure weakening the vessel walls, or sometimes an aneurysm we never knew was there. I once had a patient who slipped in the bathroom, just a small fall, but that was enough to rupture a weakened blood vessel in his brain. The consequences changed his family's life forever. So what raises your risk? The usual suspects: high blood pressure, diabetes, high cholesterol, smoking, obesity, a sedentary lifestyle, and chronic stress. Maybe you're thinking, I've got a couple of those. And you're right, most people over 50 have at least 1 or 2. But here's the good news: unlike age or genetics, most of these risks are in your control. You can choose to walk more, eat better, manage stress more wisely. And every small choice you make is like removing 1 brick from the wall that's quietly being built toward a future stroke. I want you to reflect on this. Have you ever skipped checking your blood pressure or brushed off a routine blood sugar test? That's the moment we turn our backs on our body, and while the body is patient, it will eventually demand to be heard. What I'm about to share in the next section might just change the way you live. Because these aren't just theories, they're real warning signals your body sends sometimes a month before a stroke strikes. If you're still with me and finding this helpful, drop a number 1 in the comments. That's your way of saying, yes, I agree, I want to live healthier. And now let's move into the most important part: the 9 warning signs of stroke that you should never ever ignore. 1. High blood pressure. Let me start with the most silent yet most dangerous enemy of the brain: long-term high blood pressure. Do you know why they call it the silent killer? Because most of the time you don't actually feel anything obvious. It quietly wears down your blood vessels day after day, until one day a stroke strikes like a bolt of lightning out of a clear sky. I remember one of my patients, Margaret, 67 years old. She came to see me because of recurring headaches, sometimes paired with a racing heartbeat. She thought it was just aging, maybe a bit of insomnia. But when we checked her blood pressure, it was alarmingly high. We started treatment right away. A few months later, she came back and said to me, "Doctor, if I hadn't come in that day, I might not be here now." Margaret's story is a powerful reminder. High blood pressure is never something to take lightly. Have you ever had nagging headaches, shortness of breath, climbing the stairs, or felt your heart beating irregularly? Don't ignore those signs. That might be your body ringing the alarm bell. Study after study has shown that long-term high blood pressure is the #1 reason blood vessels in the brain become damaged. They harden, they weaken, and they're more likely to burst. And when that happens, the brain pays the price. I want you to picture a dam holding back water. If the pressure builds day after day, year after year, without being released eventually, that dam will give way and disaster follows. That's exactly what happens to our blood vessels. None of us want to become victims simply because we ignored an early warning. The good news is high blood pressure is easy to detect. With something as simple as a home blood pressure monitor, you can know exactly where you stand. And with healthy eating, regular exercise, and proper medical checkups, you can take control of it. So if you're listening to me right now, ask yourself, how long has it been since I last checked my blood pressure? Your answer might be more important than you realize. Because high blood pressure isn't just a number. 2. Sleep problems and loud, unusual snoring. There's something most people never think about, but I want you to pay close attention. Your sleep can be a mirror reflecting the health of your brain. Many people think of snoring as nothing more than an annoyance, something that bothers the person lying next to you. But from a medical perspective, loud, unusual snoring, especially when it comes with pauses in breathing during the night, is a red flag you should never ignore. Picture this. You're lying in bed, your breathing becomes shallow, and then suddenly it stops. In that moment, your brain is like a city that just lost power. Oxygen isn't getting through. If this happens again and again, night after night, year after year, the strain on your blood vessels and your heart is enormous. It doesn't just leave you tired and unfocused the next day, it quietly raises your risk for high blood pressure, irregular heartbeat, and eventually stroke. I remember one patient, Robert, 64 years old. He came to see me after his wife kept complaining. He stops breathing so many times at night, then gasps for air. At first, Robert thought she was exaggerating, but when we ran a sleep study, we discovered he had severe sleep apnea. Once he began treatment with a CPAP machine, his blood pressure stabilized, his daytime fatigue disappeared, and his stroke risk dropped dramatically. Robert looked at me and said, "Doctor, I had no idea my snoring could be this dangerous. Have you ever experienced something like this or noticed it in someone you love? If you or a loved one snore loudly or stop breathing for short periods during sleep, don't brush it off. That might be your body's way of warning you that your brain isn't getting enough oxygen. Sleep is supposed to be a time when your body rests, heals, and restores itself. But if sleep becomes a struggle just to breathe, then every night brings you one step closer to a possible stroke. My message here is simple. Pay attention to your sleep. If you suspect sleep apnea, don't hesitate to get checked. One simple test could catch the problem early and save you from a life-changing event. 3. Vision problems. You see, sleep may seem simple, but it can quietly reveal hidden risks of stroke. And sometimes your body doesn't just warn you while you're asleep, it does. So the moment you open your eyes to the world, that's the next sign. I want you to pay very close attention to vision problems. Imagine this, you wake up in the morning, pick up your usual newspaper, and suddenly the words look blurry. Or while driving, one of your eyes goes dark for a few minutes, then clears up again. Most people shrug it off, thinking, oh, it's just eye strain or it's just age. But as a doctor, I need to tell you these sudden changes in vision, even if they only last a short while, can be your brain's way of crying out for help. One of my patients, Linda, 62 years old, told me she once lost vision in one eye for about 2 minutes. She thought it was just bright sunlight playing tricks on her. Thankfully, she decided to see a doctor. What we discovered was that she had just experienced a transient ischemic attack, or a mini stroke. Without early detection, she could have suffered a major stroke within weeks. Here's what happens when blood vessels carrying oxygen to the brain or to the optic nerve get blocked. Even for a moment, your eyes react right away. It might show up as blurred vision, temporary darkness, flashes of light, or little black spots in your field of view. Remember this, your eyes aren't just the window to your soul, they're also a mirror reflecting the health of your brain's blood vessels. So think about it this way. If you ignore these subtle signs, you're giving stroke, the silent enemy, another step closer to your life. But if you act quickly and see a doctor when unusual vision changes appear, you can stop a disaster before it happens. So next time you or someone you love notice sudden blurriness, double vision, or temporary vision loss, don't take it lightly. It might not just be about your eyes. It could be about saving your brain. Or tingling tongue or sudden trouble swallowing. You see, our eyes can reveal a lot about the health of the brain, but the warning signs of stroke don't stop there. The body has its own subtle language, and sometimes it cries out for help in the very moment you're eating a spoonful of soup or sipping a glass of water. That's when you might notice a tingling tongue or sudden difficulty swallowing. I've had many patients describe this strange experience. They're enjoying a normal dinner, and suddenly their tongue feels stiff, hard to control. Some say they try to swallow water, but feel like it's stuck or they choke. Others try to speak, and their words come out slurred or distorted. And then just a few minutes later, everything seems normal again. That brief disappearance of symptoms is exactly why so many people brush it off. But from my perspective as a doctor with over 30 years of experience caring for people over 50, I can tell you this is a very serious warning. Most often, it's connected to what we call a TIA, a transient ischemic attack or mini stroke. Simply put, blood flow to the brain gets blocked for a short time. The areas of the brain that control speech, tongue movement, and swallowing don't work properly. Research shows that about 1 in 3 people who experience a TIA will go on to have a major stroke within weeks or months if nothing is done. I'll never forget one patient, Harold, 68 years old. One evening while eating soup, he suddenly found it hard to swallow. He even choked several times. His family thought he was just eating too fast and ignored it. A week later, Harold suffered a major stroke and ended up in the hospital for a long stay. If his family had recognized that first warning sign and taken him in right away, the outcome might have been very different. So I want you to ask yourself, have I ever felt my tongue go numb? Had trouble speaking clearly or found it difficult to swallow, even for just a moment? If the answer is yes, don't ignore it. That's the time to see a doctor before those symptoms return stronger and more dangerous. Remember, the brain never sends signals without a reason. From vision to speech, every small change is a puzzle piece in the bigger picture of your health. And if you learn to listen closely, you can stop a storm called stroke before it ever arrives. 5. Numbness or weakness on one side of the body. Do you remember in the last warning sign I talked about the tongue suddenly feeling stiff, making it hard to speak or swallow? Well, the brain has many ways of warning us when a certain area isn't getting enough blood and oxygen. And sometimes that signal doesn't come through speech. It shows up in the way we move. This is when you suddenly notice that your arm, your leg, or even one side of your face goes numb or weak. I've had patients tell me they were sitting drinking a cup of coffee and the cup just slipped out of their hand without them realizing it. Others said they got out of bed and one leg just refused to cooperate. These things can happen suddenly and sometimes they disappear just as quickly. That's why many people dismiss it as bad posture or temporary poor circulation. But in reality, this could be one of the most urgent warning signs of stroke. In medicine, we use a very simple rule that I want you to remember forever, Peshtem. F. Let's look at the face. If one side droops or the smile looks uneven, it's a red flag. Atyo, arm. Ask the person to raise both arms. If one arm drifts down or can't stay up, don't ignore it. S, speech, slurred speech words that don't sound right or the inability to speak clearly. T, time in his brain. Every minute, millions of brain cells die. Call emergency services right away. I'll never forget one of my patients, Martha, 72 years old. One morning while brushing her hair, she realized her right arm couldn't lift as usual. Within 30 minutes, her mouth began to droop and her speech became slurred. Thankfully, her son recognized the fast rule and called 911 immediately. Because she got to the hospital in time, she recovered well. She can now walk and talk normally. But if they had waited even an hour longer, the outcome might have been completely different. You see, sometimes the smallest changes in the body are actually a map pointing to much bigger dangers. If you or someone you love suddenly feels weakness on one side, whether in the arm, leg, or face, treat it as an emergency, not a minor inconvenience. And here's something important. Before a major stroke happens, the body often sends these trial warnings in brief temporary episodes. That's your last chance to act in time. 6. Speech problems. Remember in the last warning sign we talked about when part of your body suddenly goes weak or numb, like dropping something from your hand or struggling to walk straight? That's the brain crying out for help. But there's something even more frightening when your ability to speak, the very tool you use to connect with the world, suddenly slips away. I've seen many patients face this exact situation. One gentleman, 68 years old, told me I was talking to my wife, and in my head I knew exactly what I wanted to say. But when I opened my mouth, the words came out broken, stuttering. My wife looked terrified, and I felt trapped inside my own body. That's what we call speech disturbance, one of the classic warning signs of stroke. When the part of your brain that controls language doesn't get enough blood flow, you may experience some very troubling symptoms. You're mid-conversation and suddenly start stuttering or slurring words. Wosis, you want to say a simple, familiar word, but it just disappears even though it's on the tip of your tongue. Or worse, you hear someone speaking to you, but the words don't make sense as if they were talking in a foreign language. Have you ever felt that? Or maybe seen a loved one struggle with it? If yes, don't brush it off. Think of your brain. It has stored decades of memories, words, and conversations, and now it's crying for help. If you don't act, that entire library could shut down in an instant. I'll never forget Henry, one of my patients, 74 years old. One afternoon, while calling his granddaughter, his speech suddenly became garbled and slurred. Thankfully, she was a nursing student. She recognized it as a possible stroke and rushed him to the ER within the hour. Because of that quick action, Henry recovered well, though he still needed months of speech therapy. He later told me, "Doctor, not being able to talk to my granddaughter, it felt like I lost my soul." That's why I want to emphasize this language as the bridge that connects us to the people we love. And when that bridge suddenly collapses, it's never a small issue. It's a red alert from your brain. So remember, if you or someone you love suddenly starts stuttering, slurring, or can't understand words, treat it as an emergency. Don't wait for it to go away. Don't tell yourself, oh, it's just fatigue. Act immediately. Because with stroke, as I've said many times before, time is life. 7. Sudden neurological changes. In the last warning sign, we talked about how language can suddenly break apart sentences, turning into fragments, words slipping away. But sometimes it's not just speech that vanishes. Sometimes your whole world feels like it's spinning out of control. I've had patients come into my office saying things like, "Doctor, lately I've been getting dizzy. My head feels like it's spinning, almost like I just stepped off a boat. Sometimes I even forget what I was about to do when I walked into the kitchen." At first, most people shrug it off as just a aging, slower memory, a little forgetfulness, maybe some imbalance. But the truth is, sudden neurological changes like these are not always normal. They can actually be early warning signs of a stroke. Imagine this: you're taking a walk in the garden when suddenly your legs feel unsteady, as if the ground tilted beneath you. You try to keep going, but your head is spinning, your mind is foggy, and for a brief moment, you're not even sure where you are. That's not just ordinary dizziness. That could be your brain struggling to get enough blood, causing your balance and memory to flicker in and out. One of my patients, Helen, age 70, went through exactly this. She told me that while cooking dinner, she suddenly felt groggy. Her hands were shaky, and she couldn't even remember if she had added salt or sugar to the pot. Her family thought she was just tired, but a few days later, she fell down the stairs. After tests, we discovered she had experienced several transient ischemic attacks. Mini strokes, the body's way of knocking on the door before a real stroke arrives. Here's what I want you to understand. Normal aging is slow, very gradual. But sudden changes, sharp memory lapses, brief confusion, severe dizziness are never normal. They are signs that the brain is in trouble. Have you ever walked into a room and completely forgotten why you were there, or blanked on a conversation you just had? If this happens, occasionally over years, it may just be age. But if it comes on suddenly out of nowhere, that's when you need to pay attention and get checked immediately. With stroke, the body often sends out subtle warnings, but only those who truly listen can catch them. Don't dismiss everything as just old age. Sometimes recognizing the difference means everything. It's the line between sitting with your grandchildren, sharing stories, or losing that chance forever. And if you're still here watching and finding this information useful, drop a number 1 in the comments to let me know you're with me. Now let's move on to the next warning sign. 8. Unusual fatigue. Earlier we talked about sudden neurological changes when memory suddenly slips, when the world spins and balance is lost. But there's another signal, one that's even more subtle, easier to dismiss, and often mistaken for just getting old. That signal is unusual fatigue. I've had many patients tell me, "Doctor, lately, I've been feeling completely drained. I sleep enough sometimes, even more than usual, but I still wake up heavy, exhausted, with no energy to do anything." Have you ever felt like that? It's not the normal tiredness after a long day's work, nor the grogginess from a sleepless night. This kind of fatigue feels as if your energy is being drained from the inside out. When blood doesn't flow properly to the brain, nerve cells are starved of oxygen and nutrients. As a result, the body falls into a state of exhaustion, even if you haven't done anything strenuous. In many cases, this could be a sign of a TIA, a transient ischemic attack, sometimes called a mini stroke. TIAs often last just a few minutes or hours, then vanish, tricking people into thinking it was nothing serious. But in truth, a TIA is one of the strongest warnings that a real stroke may be just around the corner. I remember one of my patients, Rosa, age 69. She often told her daughter that she was just a little tired and didn't have the energy to garden the way she used to. The family assumed it was simply aging until one morning she couldn't get out of bed at all. Tests later revealed she had been experiencing multiple TIAs without realizing it. If only she or her family had recognized that unusual fatigue as a warning sign, she might have avoided a major stroke. What concerns me most is that many people accept fatigue as normal, as the price of aging. But I want you to remember this: our bodies never complain without a reason. If you feel drained despite proper rest, it's time to pay close attention. Ask yourself, why do I feel so exhausted that I don't even want to get out of bed when a good night's sleep used to be enough? Why does this heaviness keep coming back without a clear cause? Sometimes the answer isn't age. It's the silent blockage of blood vessels in the brain. So treat unusual fatigue not just as a mood or a passing state, but as a warning sign. Because who knows, this could be the brain's final message before a real storm strikes. 9. Sudden severe headache. Earlier we talked about unusual fatigue, when your body feels drained even after a full night's sleep. That's a quiet, subtle warning. But sometimes the body stops whispering and starts shouting. That shout often comes as a sudden, terrible headache. Think about the usual headaches you've had: tension, lack of sleep, or a weather-triggered ache. Those are unpleasant, sure, but they usually ease with rest or an over-the-counter pain reliever. A stroke-related headache is different. People often call it the worst headache of my life. It hits out of nowhere like a hammer to the skull, intense, overwhelming, and may come with nausea or vomiting. I had a patient once, James 66. He told me I was watching TV when my head suddenly felt like it was being squeezed. I couldn't even stand up before I collapsed. He had a brain hemorrhage from a ruptured aneurysm. Thankfully, his family got him to the ER in time. If they'd waited just 15 minutes longer, he might not have been able to tell me his story. What makes this type of headache so dangerous is how sudden and severe it is. It doesn't build slowly, it arrives like a storm. And most importantly, it is never just a normal headache. If that severe pain comes with nausea, blurred vision, weakness, or speech problems, treat it as an emergency and call 911 right away. I know a lot of us have the habit of toughing it out thinking everyone gets headaches. But after 50, we can't be casual about this. A single painkiller might dull the discomfort, but it won't fix the real cause if a blood vessel in the brain is leaking or about to burst. Remember, every pain carries a message. A sudden severe headache is the loudest, most urgent message your brain can send. Help me now. Don't ignore it. Don't wait. Don't tell yourself it will pass. So now we've gone through the 9 warning signs your body may give you up to a month before a stroke. Some are quiet whispers, some are loud alarms, but all deserve your attention. Sometimes recognizing one small sign in time can save your life or the life of someone you love. Before we finish, I wanted to hear from you. Take a moment to reflect and share one thing you learned today that you plan to put into practice. Let's support each other as we come to terms with these realities and take steps to protect our health. We've just gone through the warning signs, the whispers, and the loud alarms that your body might send before a stroke actually happens. But knowing the signs isn't enough. What matters more is how you live each day to lower your risk starting right now. I often tell my patients, prevention isn't a magic pill. It's a choice you make over and over every single day. And honestly, those choices are simpler than you might think. First, remember this: blood pressure is like the brain's ticking clock. When it's too high, your blood vessels are stretched thin, and even a tiny tear can spell disaster. Keeping your blood pressure under control and your blood sugar steady, especially if you have diabetes, is the foundation of protecting your brain. Next, think about weight and movement. I've seen so many people over 60 who still walk daily, not to become athletes, but to keep their hearts pumping stronger, their vessels more flexible, and their minds sharper. Just 150 minutes of exercise a week, that's 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week, can make a world of difference. Now let's talk food. Your plate can be the best natural medicine. Vegetables, fruits, whole grains, fish, and plant-based oils. These are the nutrients your brain loves. Cut back on salt, sugar, and saturated fats. One of my patients gave up salty foods, and within 6 months, his blood pressure dropped so much that his doctor had to lower his medication. That's the power of healthy eating. And then there's a silent enemy: smoking. I've seen some of the worst stroke cases in long-term smokers. Quitting smoking and cutting down on alcohol, it's not just advice. It's one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself and your family. Don't forget your mental health. Stress is like a slow fire burning your blood vessels from the inside. Learn to let go, breathe deeply, and make sure you're getting 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep. Sleep doesn't just calm your mind, it repairs and restores your brain. Finally, something simple but often overlooked: regular checkups. A quick blood pressure reading or a routine blood test can uncover hidden risks before they become life-threatening. I've saved many patients just because they came in for their annual checkup. You see, prevention isn't about something distant or complicated. It's in what you eat, how you move, and how you care for your mind and body every single day. Start today, because there's no better moment than now to protect your future. My dear friend, we've just taken an important journey together, from recognizing the early warning signs of stroke to learning how to prevent it through everyday choices. You might be sitting quietly right now asking yourself, have I overlooked any of these signals? And let me tell you, even asking that question is already the first step forward. I've seen many patients who later felt deep regret. They thought their headaches, a bit of numbness, or even loud snoring at night were just normal. But the truth is our bodies always whisper before the storm strikes. The question is, are you really listening? If there's one thing I want you to take away today, it's this. Don't wait. Take action while you still can. Controlling your blood pressure, eating healthy, exercising regularly, and keeping your spirit light. These aren't just ways to live longer. They're ways to live fully alongside the people you love most. And if you found this video helpful, please leave a like, share it with your friends, and subscribe to Strong Health Way. By doing so, you're not only protecting your own health, but also helping spread the gift of healthy living to many others. Remember, this health is the greatest gift of all, and you have the power to protect it starting today.